that was a wonderful project that began now, it's almost 20 years ago. I had been commissioned by a magazine to photograph Louis Rubin for his press Algonquin in North Carolina, and he asked me if I'd be interested in photographing a bunch of Southern writers. So I photographed Eudora Welty, Robert Penn Warren, Walker Percy, Reynolds Price, Ralph Ellison, for their archives in Chattanooga, the Fellowship of Southern Writers archive. And someone showed it to a publisher, and I said, "Let's make a wonderful book." Eudora Welty had terrible osteoporosis, and she also was wearing a very busy white shirt. I asked her to put a jacket on for both those reasons, to cover up her blouse, and they also hide her back. And she said to me, "Now, why would I put that on that? Why would I put it on my jacket? I'll cut it in the middle of my living room." And, you know, like I thought quickly, I said, "Well, Miss Welty, it implies an event that hasn't happened yet."
Well, nice.
She liked that. She said, "Oh, they won't know what I'm coming from." For instance, I couldn't read all the writers who I photographed. I did try to read something about them, but no, I know photographers who do feel that's terribly important. For me, it wasn't. I mean, the act of reading someone's literature, to me, there's no relationship to then is to photograph that person. I mean, it's sort of, it's as if you read Shakespeare and then went to a study and became consumed with Shakespeare's pen. I mean, that has really nothing to do with the content. On the other hand, when I photographed Hunt Hawkins, his daughter very much wanted to be in the picture. And Hunt Hawkins is a really fine poet. He's in Tallahassee. And Hunt is just beautiful. Rarely have I photographed someone who was just had no guard, had no artifice. He was so honest. I mean, you really felt like you were looking into his soul. And his daughter had just come back from swimming in the summer, and she really wanted to be in the picture. Really. And so what I said to him was, "Look, if I had 12 shots, it would take 12 pictures." Well, as I worked with her, it was a very large camera, 810. And I said to Hunt, if I think I've got it, then we can do, I'll save a couple sheets of film and I'll do the son of the daughter. And so I said, I'm sure I get the shot, let me get a picture of you holding her. And afterwards he thanked me, and he said, "I just wrote a poem about doing just that, about holding her when she came out of the pool." I think you always have, for any artist you have some idea, but it's also usually a pretty good idea to leave it open, because you can't predict what's going to happen. No, in many ways it's theater. I'm using a very large camera, and I can't, with a 35mm, you can really just sort of float around somebody, talk, and bring the camera up and down to your face, and after a while, for them, looking at you or looking at your camera is the same thing. That's not going to happen with a big view camera. And actually, more importantly, I'm very concerned about the lighting. And so that, if I've got artificial light set up and they turn from this direction to another direction, it's going to totally change how their face is rendered. Well, this was ironic, was that I begun a series of portraits about a year before Louis commissioned me, and the idea for the portraits, the premise, the parameter, was that in the same way the writer doesn't didactically describe every moment in a character's existence, that a writer will select the moments and define them in a broader sense. That's what I was trying to do with the portraits. I didn't want the photograph. A photograph is light in time. You open a shutter, you close it. And I wanted that sense to not be tied into that particular moment. And I don't know if it's possible. But that's what I was trying to do. What I found was, and this is sort of just technical problems. If you have some high aesthetic idea, then what are the practical solutions? Yeah, I did. I found it was much better to photograph people in their home. I met them on their territory. There were certain practical applications that if they were wearing a shirt that really wasn't going to work, it was easy enough to have them change it. But it was to make them feel comfortable. One of the things I found, a number of the writers came to my studio. I used to live on 26th Street in Manhattan, and I was really unhappy with the pictures. And what I finally realized was I was shooting them in the studio. It was a big lawn, but I lived in the other half. So I said, well, instead of photographing the studio, photograph where you live. The picture of Donna Tartt, she's lying on my sofa. I asked her, she was very interested in Robert Louis Stevenson. My grandmother had written a book about Stevenson. I didn't tell her. She thought I was a great authority. But I asked her to turn profile. And she said, no, I won't turn profile. It reminds me too much of my father's. And I said, Donna, you're telling me more about your feelings about your father than you are about your feelings about your profile. And I can't remember what she was thinking at that point, but she just, she wasn't addressing the camera. Wasn't anything special. She's tiny. I don't know if she liked it or not. For instance, a lot of photographers, I think they overwhelm their subjects, and subjects then are very compliant to them, and just different ways of working. And they certainly get great results that way. I'm not comfortable working like that. I do think that a portrait is a collaboration, and that I want somebody to be able to bring something of themselves. I don't want to have to tell them who to be. And I think that certainly comes through. I mean, there were some pictures like Bailey White where she's holding eggs, and Timothy Warren where he's holding a snake, where I talked to them very specifically about doing something that was very deliberately narrative. But yeah, it was participation in the process. I spent 7 years doing the writers, and that's the thing that's sort of difficult. You really commit something, to doing something, and then when it's over, there's sort of emptiness, a void. And so it's wonderful that I don't feel the sort of personal connection that I did, when I was working on the project. It's like the old analogy of your children leave home. I mean, for me, this project's left home. I'm doing other things now, but it's still my child, and I'm very proud of it. So coming here is a wonderful chance for me to enjoy it, and enjoy it from, I feel there's a safety in that distance. And I don't feel vulnerable to those pictures, because I don't feel connected to them anymore. But also then for me to come here and work, I find as I get older, time becomes more and more of an adversary. So I have a chance to come here and work for 2 or 3 weeks, and that being not only allowed, but really required of me. It's a wonderful requirement to me.